Drawing in three, two, one. 15 seconds has elapsed. Kendrick Lamar once said that without art, Earth is simply a rock floating in space. And we can find this quotation to be absolutely true because without art, there's really no significant defining features that humanity has, barring our own intelligence. However, we can see that it's that certain intelligence that gives us the ability to even create art in the first place. So, if we couldn't create art, it also suggests that we didn't have that intelligence to then create that art. And it's why I chose today's quotation. It requires wisdom to understand wisdom. The music is nothing if the audience is deaf, by Walter Lippmann. And we can see that Walter Lippmann is absolutely true for two key reasons. First is the advent of AI and how that reflects of how our society treats art in our current day. But next, we can also delve further into how society produces wisdom in general and how that helps them and how that helps them provide more sustainable and more thorough executions of their own ideologies. AI has been everywhere, from Google search engines to you scrolling on social media and seeing it. However, one of the most prolific uses of AI is through art. And we can see two examples of how this is demonstrated. First is the visual example, but next is a more novelistic kind. The visual example is clear. We've all seen plenty, dozens, if not hundreds of videos every single day of AI art taking over our feeds. But it's not just for entertainment, it's also used in advertising. Recently, Coca Cola just let out an ad where they use primarily AI art to promote their own product. If advertising is also susceptible to AI art, what else is there? This means that essentially our society has deluded itself by viewing AI art as even more acceptable. However, we can see that there are many counter proponents against AI art, but corporations seem to be taking a firm stance towards AI art simply because it's cheaper. We can also see a more novelistic view of how AI art has spread through our society through the advent of more and more intelligent chatbots. Chatbots are constantly flooding our feeds without us even knowing it. Once you go on X or even Instagram, you see a flood of random comments that seem nonsensical. And if you don't have the proper wisdom, you'll fall into the trap without realizing it. How all of these comments are simply bots. Because of the advent of AI, these bots have gotten more and more intelligent to properly trick or fool you. And we can see that this is absolutely a net negative on our society Because if art, something that is the reflection of a human soul, is not created by a human, then it's simply nothing. But we can also see about how art and wisdom in general is merely can be a symptom of great people. And we can see two key examples of this. The first is Albert Camus, and the next is Francis Perkins. Albert Camus is an Algerian born French philosopher who created the idea of absurdism. Absurdism is a subsect of nihilism. However, unlike nihilism, absurdism says just because the universe doesn't care about yourself doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't care about yourself. Essentially, you should be so free and so absurd comparatively to the absurdity of the universe that you should become a better person. Absurdism is a reflection of how art itself can be used as a vessel for this. By you trying to become free, you should constantly be making mediums to express that freedom to the masses. But we can also see that Francis Perkins take this into another direction. Francis Perkins was the first woman and the first department lead of the Department of Labor under FDR, and she saw and witnessed many tragedies. However, she took wisdom from these tragedies and instead turned them into reform, making it so that child labor laws were stricter, that work weekdays were reduced, essentially making it so that everyone in the United States simply had a better time. And she did this because she took wisdom from tragic events that she has witnessed on her own. So we return to today's quotation. It requires wisdom to understand wisdom. The music is nothing if the audience is deaf, and we can see this is true in two key ways. First is the advent of AI and how that reflection is actually an antithesis to this and how that's a bad thing. But next we can see about how wise people make great things through Albert Camus making his own absurd fantasies and Francis Perkins providing reform.